Consider the following sequence of events. It's the final circle in a Warzone match with 3 teams left and you're spectating your teammate on console. You watch him go to engage with the team but completely misses a player aiming at him on his left. While to you, it's very easy to see him, your teammate starts to get hit and has to retreat. This sequence really happened to me and my friends the other night, and all I had to say was, 80 FOV, LMAO. This sequence points out one of the deepest problems with crossplay on Warzone, FOV. FOV stands for field of view, or simply put, how much you can see. Console default is 80, while PC has a slider that can go as low as 60 and as high as 120. Most professional players opt to max out the FOV slider to increase what they can see on the map, but some people speculate that it also helps with visible recoil. So I set out to answer whether or not FOV makes that big of a difference in your skill as a Warzone player. But before I can answer that, it's important to understand where the need for a console FOV slider comes from. To understand this, we have to look at cross-platform multiplayer games as a whole. The first cross-platform game that I played was Fortnite. I played on Xbox at the time, and while it was really fun to play with and against my friends on PlayStation, when my friends on PC would get involved, it felt like we were playing 2 different games. It could have been that they were better than me, which is true, but the increased frames and lower latency certainly didn't help. For me, this was the first time I felt like I was at a true disadvantage in a video game. Now, take the console versus PC debate and couple it with mouse and keyboard versus controller debate, and you have a recipe for outright social media war. This divide has only gotten worse as of late due to the seemingly clear advantages PC players have over console players in Warzone. PC players can use filters to take away shadows, typically have lower latency, higher frames, and an FOV slider. Of all these differences, the FOV slider seems like it's the easiest change for Raven Software to implement into the game. And with the release of Caldera, console players were praying for just that. Vanguard, the new addition to the multiplayer series, was released with an FOV slider for console, but when Caldera came out, nothing. Seeing the amount of console players disappoint on my timeline made me truly feel for them. They just want a fair crack at playing the game that they love against people who are lucky enough to own a PC. So I decided to put FOV to the test. To make this happen, I hopped into 5 games of Warzone with my normal settings being 120 FOV. And then after spending some time shooting bots in multiplayer, I hopped back into Caldera on 80 FOV to see what my stats looked like. And the results were shocking. Keep in mind that each lobby has a different difficulty, so whenever we're compiling all the results, I'm going to take that into account. When I hopped into my games, I wanted to keep it as natural as possible, landing peak when I could, or getting as close to it as I can. I dropped a little 20 bomb in my first 5 games, so I was feeling good. When I switched to 80 FOV, the change was noticeable. Shooting the bots, I felt much slower, but tried to play as normal as I could. Although, I did feel like I was breaking my own camera when I would B-hop or slide cancel into a fight. Initially, when I jumped into Caldera, the first game was pretty difficult. But then, the most unexpected thing happened. I dropped a banger. Unfortunately, I died to a cheater, so who knows what could have been. Maybe these results aren't going to be as predictable as I thought. The next 2 games, I felt like I had a little bit of fatigue from the previous 2 20 bombs, but in the final game, I dropped another 20 kill game on 80 FOV. Now, before I get into the numbers, I have some thoughts on my experience. First, I think that lower FOV has its advantages and disadvantages when playing. For example, it was really easy to see people at long ranges, but difficult to run through the woods out of fear of the unknown. Secondly, I heavily recommend using high alert if you're on console. That alone solved my biggest problem with 80 FOV, which is I just straight up couldn't see people on my left or right. Finally, I really had to change my playstyle over time. I had to use more cover and re-peaks and a lot less running and gunning and relying on my aim. Now, to the numbers. My 5 games on 120 FOV looked like this. My KD over these 5 games was a 5.78, and I averaged 10.4 kills per game. And the lobby's average difficulty was right around a 1.06 KD. Now, my 5 games on 80 FOV looked like this. My KD over the 5 games was a 5.4, while I was averaging 10.8 kills per game, with these lobbies averaging a difficulty around 1.026. So if you put these numbers next to each other, the results are quite surprising. I certainly was more consistent on 120 FOV, potentially due to the fact that I play on that setting already, but I averaged slightly more kills on 80 FOV and was able to produce 2 20-kill games. The lobby difficulty was slightly easier when I changed to 80 FOV, but a couple hundredths worth of player KD isn't going to change my ability to perform that much. So what does all of this mean? I would say based on this data, FOV isn't a huge determining factor on success in Warzone. After warming up, I was able to adapt and still perform at a high level on the setting. However, the fact that an FOV slider isn't even an option to console players seems a bit ludicrous. I can say without a doubt that I certainly prefer to play on 120 FOV and would love to see it implemented for console in the future. Oh yeah, and my console friend from the beginning of the video, he has a 4.63 KD. If you enjoyed, be sure to check out some of our other videos here.